Monster Mash is the 1962 Halloween novelty song that exploded in popularity, growing over decades to become an essential part of the holiday. It's the cornerstone of all Halloween DJ sets and a lot of TV specials. But who was Bobby Boris Pickett, the man behind the monster, and how did he make his song take over the world's scariest holiday? This is the story of Monster Mash, and how Bobby Boris Pickett and his Crypt Kickers changed Halloween forever. Bobby Boris Pickett was born in the Boston suburb of Somerville, Massachusetts on February 11, 1938, as Universal monsters were terrorizing the silver screen. Somerville was also the home of the Winter Hill Gang. Notorious mobster Whitey Bulger was 9 years older than Bobby and also roamed the mean streets of Somerville. Of the city, Pickett said, "You had two choices as a young man. You could either be a gangster when you grew up or an athlete." Bobby's dad managed the neighborhood movie house, the Somerville Theater, so naturally Pickett grew up with Universal stars like Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr. in iconic films like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, and The Wolfman. Pickett served a year and a half in Korea, returning home to Boston in 1958. A natural performer and cut-up, Pickett became a regular at talent shows around the Boston area, at places like the Irish American Club in Everett. It was there he honed his hilarious Boris Karloff impressions, wowing crowds and often taking home the talent show prize money. "I'd win all the time. I knew I was going to Hollywood." And so he did. In 1960, Bobby moved to LA with stars in his eyes and a dream to become a movie star, or at least an actor. He finally got an agent and things were looking up, until his agent died 2 weeks later. That's just one example of the thread of morbid humor that seems to run through Bobby Pickett's life. Luckily, at that time, Bobby ran into 4 young Italian guys from the neighborhood, Somerville. Lenny and Billy Capizzi, Ronnie Del Torto, and Lou Toscano had also made their way to LA, and they were forming a band called the Cordials. Lenny was the band leader, and he asked Bobby to join. We had sung around Los Angeles, literally singing for our supper at Timmy Euro's club down on Pico Boulevard. It was an Italian restaurant. We literally sang for spaghetti dinners on Friday nights. This is how Monster Mash came about. We used to do a tune called Little Darlin'. I asked Lenny if I could do a Boris Karloff impression on that part where the bass baritone comes in. And I did it as Boris Karloff, and the audience loved it. So Lenny said that very night, "You know, we ought to do a novelty record. Those things sell. And with that voice, we could get Gary Paxton to produce it." Lenny was right. Novelty songs referencing popular culture were really popular at the time. Gary Paxton had great success with Alley-Oop 2 years earlier, a song based on a comic strip. In addition to Sheb Wooley's Purple People Eater, we had the Chipmunks, songs about Charlie Brown and Snoopy, and of course, songs about horror movies like The Thing. It was a thing. But Bobby was still planning to be a Hollywood actor. I said I wasn't interested. I was leaving the group to pursue my acting career. A year went by and nothing happened in terms of that, so I called him and said I wanted to write that song. They had exactly one music industry contact, Gary Paxton. In addition to singing lead on the Hollywood Argyle's hit Alley-Oop, Paxton had also produced it. He agreed to produce the song for the pair. And so on one Saturday in May of 1962, Bobby Pickett and Lenny Capizzi sat down and wrote the song, recording it into a Roland Sack tape recorder. Lenny sat down at the piano and began futzing with various 4-chord progressions, and I stood next to the piano. Like me, Lenny was a major horror movie fan from childhood. He loved Bela Lugosi as Dracula. He knew I had the Boris Karloff voice pretty nailed, though in retrospect, I feel what I actually had was a very cartoonish rendition of that wonderful actor's voice. We agreed the Karloff voice was the most obvious one to tell the story, but what was the story? Well, Lenny suggested, maybe the Frankenstein monster should start a dance craze. "That's it," I said. They banged out Monster Mash in 2 hours and brought the tape to Gary. He told them it's a hit, and he booked studio time. And so, while Herb Alpert recorded Brave Bull in the studio next door, they recorded Monster Mash and the B-side, Monsters Mash Party. A young session pianist named Leon Russell can be heard on the B-side, but he came late and missed playing on Monster Mash. Legend says Ventures drummer Mel Taylor also played on the B-side. The Crypt Kickers was the name given to the backing band, referred to in the song as the Crypt Kicker 5. Johnny McRae, Ricky Page, Terry Berg, Leon Russell, and Mel Taylor. Backing vocals were provided by the legendary Darlene Love, leading her vocal group, The Blossoms. Producer Gary Paxton did all the sound effects himself in the studio, pulling a rusty nail from a board for the coffin sound, dropping chains on the floor, and blowing through a straw in water for the bubbling cauldron. That last technique would be used a few years later by the Beatles in Yellow Submarine. Like a lot of songs back then, this one was linked to a dance craze, in this case the mashed potato. The footwork was the same, but the arms and hands stuck forward in a Frankenstein monster pose. 4 major labels declined before Gary Paxton took things into his own hands. He pressed up 500 records on his own label, Garpax, and drove northward from Los Angeles, stopping in Ventura, Bakersfield, and Fresno counties, handing out copies of Monster Mash to DJs. The response was overwhelming. By the time Gary got back to Southern California, his phone had been lighting up like a Christmas tree. London Records, which was one of the outfits that had turned him down, called and suddenly said they'd changed their mind, of course. The records were being ordered on a massive level. Despite the popularity of the song, some radio stations found it too creepy and morbid for the air. The BBC banned it for years, relenting only when it was re-released in the 1970s and peaked at number 3 on the UK charts. One of the London Records promotion men ran into Boris Karloff at Wallach's Music City as he was buying a copy of the Monster Mash album. Karloff told him he loved the record. Karloff later did his version of the Monster Mash on Shindig for their Halloween special in 1965. Ted Cassidy, Lurch from the Addams Family, portrayed the monster. The Monster Mash single was number 1 on the Billboard Top 100 chart from October 20th to 27th, 1962. Monster Mash was then re-released in 1970 and 73. For decades following the success of Monster Mash, there were spin-offs and other novelty tunes, many of them made by Pickett himself. Monsters Holiday, a Christmas-themed follow-up, was recorded by Pickett and released in December of '62. In 1985, with the growing popularity of rap music, Pickett released Monster Rap. The track describes the mad scientist's frustration at being unable to teach the monster how to talk, until finally, the monster begins to successfully rap. During the 2004 presidential election, Pickett turned the song into a campaign video and retitled it Monster Slash, with lyrics by environmental campaigner Peter Altman, in which he critiqued President George W. Bush's environmental policies. In 1989, Stuart Hersh began managing Pickett, learning that Bobby did not own the master recording to Monster Mash. He was shocked.
I was working in radio in Westchester. We were doing like a Halloween thing, and I said, who would be better to contact Bobby Boris Pickett? So I contacted him, and while I had him on the phone, I said to him, do you still perform your song? And he said, well, yes. Once in a while, they dig me up, and I do a medley of my hit. And I said, okay, and how much do you usually get for that? And he said, about $500. And I went, no way. I said, I'm going to do better by you for that. I need to see if I can get you what you deserve for this song. This song means too much. I just told him, I said, just drop me a little note that says, you're okay with that. We did 18 years on pretty much a handshake.
So in 1993, Bobby re-recorded a perfect copy of the original Monster Mash, and they used that to undercut the owners of the track.
I had a guy who I knew, a drummer, who brought in a 1950s drum set. The key to it was the engineers said, listen, why don't we take 2 tracks of what we're doing and put the original on those 2 tracks. So we put the original on those 2 tracks. Then after I had the art track recorded, I had Bobby come in. Bobby did his vocal. By that time, Bobby was doing much darker vocal than what was on the record. The zombies were having fun. And I was like, no, cut. Bobby, can you go, the zombies were having fun? And he was like, oh no, do you really want me to do that like that? I said, we got to make this sound like it did. We took it and I kept stopping him in places. We mixed it. And while we were mixing it, me and the engineer just kept flipping back from our version to the original, our version to the original, until we couldn't tell the difference between the 2 of them. That's how we created our master.
The goal was to keep Monster Mash relevant. They did this by making Monster Mash affordable to independent production houses. In doing so, they ensured that it would always have a place on TV, movies, and pop culture.
The original master, which was billed as Bobby, Boris Pickett, and the Crypt Kickers, which was then owned by Universal Music, had an attorney that was taking all the calls for things like commercials and stuff like that. Unless you were Coca-Cola, he would hang up on them. We said we need to have control of our own master, and this way we can get it into movies and smaller projects, commercials, and things like that. Whenever you open up a Hallmark greeting card and it plays Monster Mash, that's our version. It was in Stranger Things, it was in a whole bunch of stuff. We offer that master on the official website, themonstermash.com. And on there you'll see my number. You can call me regarding the use of the master. You can also download Monster Mash, which I think everybody needs to download it around this time, especially whether it's for your party or your ringtone.
The song's annual popularity is bolstered every October by heavy saturation in all forms of media. It has come to signify spooky season much more than any other song. And if you know another show or movie that featured the song, please comment below. In 2021, nearly 60 years after its release, Monster Mash re-entered the Billboard Hot 100 chart at number 37. And before he passed in 2007, Pickett told a journalist that the record had sold 4 million copies. "I've been paid," he said, "so I believe them." If you dug that video, ballers, please click like and share this video. It's a huge help to the channel. And check out my Halloween playlist. It's got all kinds of cool videos about creepy tunes and records. Peace.